Okay, so let's quickly go on. Today, Reb Yaakov is going to give a piece of parshanut that I never saw anyone else give on the parsha on Ruth, on the parsha Sefer Ruth, and the two parshas at the end of Sefer Shoftim, which are Pesel Micha and Pilegish Begiva. Okay, he's going to give a very interesting piece of parshanut, and it's what Reb Yaakov is going to do over here he's going to explain be'iyun, right? Why it says over there, Bayamim Haim a Melech b'Yisrael. He's not going to just suffice to say that, well, there was no king, so these things happen. He's going to show exactly why without a king these things could happen, and with the king they couldn't happen. Okay? But before we get to that, let's just recap. So Reb Yaakov said, and this part he said to Rav Soloveitchik, that there's two dinim in Melech, right? There's a Melech and there's a Malchus. And the Melech has he calls it Kinyono Rechusho Prati. Once he gets Mashiach, it becomes his Malchus, and he can give it to his children. He owns it, so to speak, right? He becomes a Kli Kadosh, and that's why Shmuel kissed Shaul when he poured the Shem, and he gave him a kiss because he's now a Kli Kodesh, he's like Hegdish, so to speak, right? And now he has his own kavod. You can't ride on his horse, you can't ride on his donkey, you can't sit on his chair, right? Whereas the shofet has a din malchus, but not a din melech. If you spit in his face, he's a Talmud Chacham, so he can put you in Cherem, but he can't kill you for that. Whereas by David HaMelech, Shimi Ben Gera basically spit in his face. He cursed him out, and David was allowed to kill him. And I mentioned to you that I had a raya from the text because the one who wants to kill Shimi Ben Gera for David says, "You're a Mashiach Hashem." So I'm allowed to kill him if he curses you, right? I never told that to Reb Yaakov, but it's a good raya to Reb Yaakov. He calls him a Mashiach Hashem, not just a Melech. Okay, so that's the yesod of now. Now he's going to explain something very interesting. Okay, we have a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim, right, that says Vayehi b'Yeshurun Melech b'Sasev Roshei Am Yachat Shiftei Yisrael. Right after it says the pasuk of Torah Tzivalonu Moshe, right? You know, everybody knows that pasuk, even if you're about tshuva, because they taught it to you in Talmud Torah. Torah, 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 Tzivalanu Moshe. Everybody knows that pasuk, right? So after that, it says Vayehi b'Yeshurun Melech. It was amongst the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are called here Yeshurin from the word Yashar, even though I'm not going to go into the whole etymology of the word, because it's a very interesting etymology here. Melech, right? Who is this Melech? He wasn't the Jewish people, and Melech. So Rashi says, Vayhi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God, it was when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Melech. Okay? Ibn Ezra, and I gave you this Ibn Ezra last week. You could find it and look at it. I gave you two Ibn Ezras, one on page 272 and one on page 136. This is in Zos HaBracha, okay? And Ibn Ezra says, "Hu Moshe sheshamo Roshei Am HaTorah Mefureshes Mipiv." This Melech is Moshe, that the Roshei Am, because it says B'Sasev Roshei Am, heard the Torah, right? What is Ibn Ezra saying? He's going back on the pasuk before. Torah Tzivalonu Moshe, Marashak Gilas Yaakov, Vayehi. It was when Moshe was Melech b'Yisrael b'Sasev Roshei Am at Matan Torah, right? That's when Moshe, so to speak, gave them the Torah. Vatab Kiyol Kamelech. He was like a king. V'sasvu elav Roshei Hashvatim. V'yachazik zeh pirish. She'omar hakosav ki haTorah nitla kohanim shehem lefi dati kol kedosha biyadecha vel kol ziknei Yisrael zel b'sasev Roshei Am. That the Torah was given to the kohanim, Torah nitla kohanim, that they're called kol kedosha biyadecha, right? Which we had before. El kol ziknei Yisrael zeh b'sasev roshayam. Okay, so he says this is going on Moshe. Bekitzer, without going into exactly the parsha here, it's going on Moshe. Okay, then the 2 lines later he says Vayomer Reb Yehuda Halevi. Here he quotes Reb Yehuda Halevi, which he's fond of quoting every now and then. Ki hamelech remez leTorah. The melech is a remez for the Torah, a hint for the Torah. Vayehi b'yeshura melech. It was when the Torah was melech. Okay, so you have 3 pshatim: Rashi, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ibn Ezra, Moshe, right? Reb Yehuda Halevi, right? The Kuzari, Yisrael. It was Torah. So you have Kadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe, and Torah to learn in this pasuk. V'chein hayim mafarish a melech b'Yisrael. And that's the way he used to learn up the pshat of a melech b'Yisrael in Sefer Shoftim. As you know, at the end of Sefer Shoftim, it says it like 3 times, right? It begins by talking about the Pesel Micha, and there it says, "Bayomim hain a melech b'Yisrael isha yashor beinav yaseh," right? And then it says it again in chapter Yudches, "Bayomim hain a melech b'Yisrael." Right? And then by Pilegish Begiva, it says it again, right? It says it again. Vayehi bayamim ahem a melech b'Yisrael vayehi shelevi gar b'yarkasei Ephraim. There was no, and then at the end it says it again, right? At the end of Shoftim, a 4th time, it says bayamim ahem a melech b'Yisrael isha yashar beinav yaseh. 4 times, including the last pasuk in Sefer Shoftim. Okay.
Shurin, excuse me for interrupting. Yeah. Are you on Daf Kuf Pei Tet?
I'm Daf Kuf Pei Tet. Correct. I forgot to tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, Kuf Pei Tet. The right underneath the right paragraph, the last 2 lines on that paragraph. It's like a new piece. Okay. Now, why is Reb Yaakov introducing this piece? Because the Kuzari here, Reb Yehuda Halevi, right, says that Ein Melech b'Yisrael these 4 times means Ein Torah b'Yisrael, or Ein Mishmat HaTorah b'Yisrael, more better said. Nobody's listening to Torah, right? Now, the Pashup shot over there is Ein Melech b'Yisrael means there's no king, right? But Reb Yaakov is going to say what the Kuzari is bothered with over here, okay? He's going to say what the Kuzari is bothered with, and then he's going to say, but I disagree with him. First, he tells you what he's bothered with, and then he says, I'm going to answer up both questions my way. Okay? But the first thing he does is he's bothered with an obvious question that the Ramban already brings up to prove that Rashi's right. Okay? When do we say this pasuk? When do we say this pasuk in Sefer Dvarim, in Parshas Zos HaBrocha, right? Where in davening do we say that?
Simchas Torah.
Where?
I was just joking. I was saying Simchas Torah.
And maybe they actually do. I mean, because the parsha. But where do they say it in the davening? Right? In Malchios. Okay? In Malchios, what is Malchios? Malchios is that we're Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu Melech. And we use this pasuk, right? So it's a little bit strange to say this is going on Moshe, right? Like the Ibn Ezra, right? Or like the Torah, right? Like according to like Reb Yehuda Halevi, right? So in other words, the Ramban already asks this question. Okay, how could it be going on Moshe and the Torah? This is one of the 10 psukim. You bring the God from Malchias, right? So Reb Yaakov tries to answer that question. He tries to kvetch. And by the way, I want to tell you something. There is a rumor that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was Ibn Ezra's father-in-law. I don't know if you know. Okay, did you ever hear that? That Ibn Ezra's father-in-law, you heard it. So I don't think the historians get bent out of shape about it. Okay, I think they don't. I think historically they have problems with it. But I want to tell you, I once saw on a Barbanel. You can look at it yourself in Parshas Kitisa by the Egel. The Barbanel says over there, he quotes the Ibn Ezra, Reb Yehuda Halevi, and he says, Reb Yehuda Halevi was the Ibn Ezra's father-in-law. Okay, now he also lived about 300 years after the Ibn Ezra, right? Yehuda Halevi. So, we could say, well, what did he know 300 years later? And we live much later, of course, right? But he's Abarbanel says it, and he's usually a pretty good historian, and he says it. But from what I know, I never researched it. From what I know from people, the university people don't love it. Okay, but here's one of the places he quotes him. He never quotes him as my father-in-law, so that's a little bit of a raya, right? But he quotes him very lovingly whenever he quotes him. And Ibn Ezra could be very not lovingly when he quotes things. So he gives him a lot of respect. Okay, so Reb Yaakov says like this: "V'kivin shekei afilu nefarish v'hi b'yishur melech dekoy al Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom afilu loch efshel laskir pasuk se b'malchios." Not like the Ramban. Why? Sharei malchuso shel Moshe balo mipnei shehu shlucho shel makom. Moshe, according to this, Moshe was not a melech. Moshe was a shofet, right? And he was mamid malchus haTorah, right? So what is being mamid malchus haTorah? It's being mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The gam efshar, in other words, since he's being mamlech haTorah, he's being mamlech Torah shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's all a shliach for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you could use this as a proof. V'gam efshar la'alitz, but shegam Yehuda Halevi shapirish shezeh nemar al haTorah kaven lezeh. It's also, you could be melitz yosher, so to speak, on Yehuda Halevi that was mafarish. This is talking about the Torah. The Ibn Ezra says talking about Moshe, but Moshe was only a shliach shel makom, so that's clear that you could say it's going on God. Melech, when Moshe was melech, so it was a shliach shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But even Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says the Hainu shlo haya shofet bosa aperik shemol shofet lo yibam takolos keelu kmo pesel michu pilegush begiva. You could say that there was no shofet at that time because he says when it says there was no melech, who says now it's melech? Now we know that the word melech can mean a shofet. So it means to say that there was no shofet and therefore there was no mamlechus haTorah, right? So he says that in the davening here you could say there was no shofet, meaning somebody that was a shliach shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So either way, Moshe is a shliach shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu because he's not really a melech, or the pasuk is saying a melech b'Yisrael, there was no shofet who's the shliach shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like Moshe, and therefore he wants to kvetch that maybe you can answer the Ramban here. But I leave that to you, whether you like it or not. It's a good question. Like the Ramban has it good. Rashi seems to be, according to the davening, Rashi seems to be right, according to the Pshuta Shel davening. Okay, now I want to skip to page Kuf Tzadi. The reason why I'm skipping is not because I don't know what Reb Yaakov is saying. I'm trying to make him look good. No, the reason why I'm skipping is because Reb Yaakov keeps going. He gets really obsessed about this melech and shofet. It keeps going with new rayas. By the way, these rayas were over 50 years because sometimes it's 10 years later. He says, "I found a new raya." 20 years later, I found a new raya, and he writes it in his little diary over there. Right. So we have enough of Reb Yaakov already on this parasha to know what we know. But now I'm going to bring you, Reb Yaakov says something very interesting, which this is Reb Yaakov's source for Kolisha Shayamres Picha Morid B'Malchus is Chayiv Misa. We learned that from Yeshua, and I told you last time that Reb Yaakov asked Reb Shnei Kotler at a wedding, what's the source of the Torah? A Navi's not allowed to write halacha. That he's allowed to write that there is a halacha like that, but he's not allowed to make up a halacha. So what is the source for Kolisha Yamar Espicha in the Torah? So Reb Yaakov is about to give that now. Okay, that's not his kavanah here. You'll see what his kavanah is, but memela you have the source. Ubemis bedvarim yud zayin tes ubata el hakohanim halavim. You remember this, like when ki yipolei mimcha davar bein dan ladan bein din ladin. That's the whole parsha of what we call a zaki mamre, right? a choshev, a zaken, whose mamre the base that God will be Yerushalayim, right? And he's chayiv misa. Chayiv misa schenek. Okay? The Shofar Shir, Pirish, Harav Ibn Ezra. Okay, now look at the Rav Ibn Ezra. That's the other Ibn Ezra I gave you in Parsha Shoftim, page 136, right? He says like this: Ve'el HaShofet, Hu HaMelech, Shekasav Mishnei Torah Miyad HaKohanim. He is the Melech that wrote the Mishneh Torah from the Kohanim. Okay? Now, what is he saying over here? Well, it says El HaShofet. We always learned this parsha, right? Here, Basel HaKohanim, HaLeviim, Vel HaShofet Shibei Yamim HaHeim, right? But the Rashi V'Gilach Hasdar Mishpat. Who's that going on? That's the Dayan. He's coming to the Kohanim, right? Or the Dayan, right? It's not a melech. The Ibn Ezra said it's a melech because you already have the Kohanim. What do you think the Kohanim were if they're sitting there? What, they were going to just sacrifice for you when you're coming to ask a shayla? They were also dayanim. What's the shofet? He says, "Hu melech shekosav Mishneh Torah miyad Kohanim." He wrote the Mishneh Torah from the Kohanim, right? You know that it says over there that the melech, when he comes a melech, he writes 2 Sifrei Torah. Mishnei Torah, 2 Sifrei Torah, one that he leaves home, and then when he goes with him. And it says over there that he wrote it Milufnei Kohanim. So he says this is the Melech that wrote it from the Kohanim. So he says already, so Reb Yaakov comments on this Ibn Ezra, and he says something interesting. What Melech? Hareshal Apirav Shechayev Misa Im Yaseh Bezadon Levilti Shemoel HaShofet. What does it say later in the parsha? It says, if he doesn't listen to the shofet, he's chayiv misa. Well, the Ibn Ezra just said that shofet is the melech, right? And it says later in the parsha, right? It says later in the parsha, here, Va'isha sheyase bizadon levilti shmo al hakohen ha'omen l'sharei shamas Hashem elokecha o al hashofet umeisa yishahu. So he says that if you don't listen to according to the Ibn Ezra, it comes out, if you don't listen to the shofet, who's the melech, you're chayiv misa. Wait a minute, that's a perfect source for this halacha that you don't listen to melech, you're chayiv misa. This is the makar in the Torah. Okay? Whatever you're going to say, according to Ibn Ezra, you have to say this. Okay? Ube'emes matzinu b'gemara Rosh Hashanah daf chav hey. The koyel shoftim manigi Yisrael. This pasuk, shofet by it's the lashon over here is here. Vel shofet asher b'yamim haheim. Come to the shofet that will be at that time. You know what the Gemara's question Rosh Hashanah is? Oh, who are you going to go to the shofet at a different time? Who's living at a different time? Right? It's a famous Gemara. Right? Yiftach b'doro kishmul b'doro. Right? In other words, the Gemara is bothered with the obvious question. Asher yeh l'shofet asher yeh b'mim ato choshev lavo l'shofet shelo yeh b'mim. Obviously, it's at that time, right? He says no. So the Gemara is medayik from over here, right? You see that it says from over here. We learn yiftach b'doro kishmul b'doro, gidon b'doro ki Aaron b'doro, right? So you see from over here that pasuk is not only referring to a shofet, a dayan, it's referring to even the shoftim, because from here you're learning that yiftach b'doro kishmul b'doro, right? So you see clearly that this pasuk includes more than just a dayan. Okay, so he says this is a raya to the Ibn Ezra, and therefore we now have a raya from this pasuk, right? I never saw anybody else bring it, but Reb Yaakov is going to point out that the Abarbanel brings this raya. Okay, we'll see soon, right? Abarbanel brings this raya. Take a look. For Isi Sheina Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Avram Ben Ezra Yochid Bazeh Shagam page Kuf Tzadi Abarbanel Bagdamaso l'Sefer Shoftim Hevi Gamkin Zah Pasuk Lochiach Mimenu Sheyesh Bershus HaShofet Lo Mis Misha Mamrias Piv. That he brings this pasuk to prove that the shofet has a proof, that shofet has a right to give misa to someone who rebels against him. By the way, that Abarbanel is very kedai to learn. It's the Hagdama to Shoftim, okay? Hagdama to Shoftim, where he says the 5 things that the melech is a shofet is like a melech, and 5 reasons, 5 places where he's not like a melech. Okay, the Abarbanel was my grandfather used to call him a mudna mensch. He was an unusual person. Mudna didn't mean strange. He mean unusual person. He has like this agdama. Actually, what Reb Yaakov's talking about. Now, Reb Yaakov disagrees with him in a few of the places, very clearly, and he doesn't define it so well and clear as Reb Yaakov about the differences. But he does say, Reb Yaakov says, he brings this pasuk to learn that you have that a shofet has a right to kill you, right? Because it says Allah shofet. But he does say a melech. The pasuk comes from Yoshua, right? Which is a little bit strange because Reb Yaakov is saying that Yoshua was not a melech. So what do you mean it's coming from there, right? For a melech, right? He was not a melech, Yoshua. Anyway, the point over here is that Reb Yaakov is just showing that this pasuk could be taken out of its pshuto to mean more than just a dayan. You see that from the Ibn Ezra, you see it from the Abarbanel, and you can even be medayik that from Chazal. And therefore, it's a good proof. Okay? Now, so you don't have to learn, like Reb Shneur Kotler said, that's halach l'moshe misinai. You don't have to learn that way. You have here a pasuk that you can learn up as the source. Okay? Now, let's go on to page Kuf Tzadi Beis. Okay, because I want to get to we started late. I want to get to the page Kuf Tzadi Aleph. The reason why I'm skipping it, because he goes to town on the Abarbanel. He says the Abarbanel's wrong here and wrong here. If you want to see it, you can see it yourself, right? And plus Kuf Tzadi Beis, V'hinei, Reb Avram ben Ezra Shehevi b'shem Reb Yehuda Levi, the psukim, the shilhei shoftim, that Reb Ezra brings from the name of Yehuda Levi, that the psukim at the end of shoftim, the chsiv by yamim haim ein melech, hainu shlohaya mashmat haTorah, shlohayta mashmat haTorah. What does he say? Lohaya Torah b'Yisrael means doesn't mean there was no Torah, that they didn't have a sefer Torah. Lohaya mashmat haTorah kufia nira. Now Reb Yaakov tells you what Reb Yehuda Levi is bothered in sefer shoftim. 2 very good questions. Why he learns it's the Torah, right, and not melech kipshuto. Kfia nira yakashlo ki im lo haya melech bikol madua shofet lo micha shoftim lo micha b'pelegish givu pesel micha. He was bothered with if you're learning melech as a king, but there was shoftim, so a melech Yisrael doesn't make any sense. Okay, there was no melech, but there were shoftim. Mikom b'shoftim are you? They should have been micha. Gam lechora, a second question the Rabbi Yehuda Levi is bothered with. Shmuel keneged melech. Wait a minute, Shmuel was against the malchus. It was very clear from the text. He said to God, they want a melech, but they shouldn't have a melech. It's not right for them to have a melech. Hashem Elokechem alkechem. God, your God is your melech, right? He was against. For iu niu kakosov sefer shoftim, and the Gemara says in Baba Basra, he was the one who wrote sefer shoftim. V'amai higdim la'elu beis hamaoros, right? So why does he proceed before he tells you these 2 stories? Ma'orot, these two happenings. And that was the Reb Yehuda Levi was bothered with. How could it be that Shmuel wrote a melech b'shol means a melech, as if saying that if there would have been a melech, it would have been better. Shmuel was against malchus, so that's why he learns it doesn't mean melech; it means Torah. There was no mashmat Torah b'Yisrael, and therefore the shofet would not be enough over here because there was no mashmat Torah. Right? That was the problem over there. No mashmata Torah. Okay, that's what Reb Yaakov says. Why the Reb Yehuda Levi said what he said. But now Reb Yaakov comes and he says, "I disagree." But after looking into it, it seems to me, and here comes Reb Yaakov's parshanut, beautiful parshanut on these 2 parshas. Hashem Shema b'kolam. What did God say to Shmuel? Shmuel said, terrible, they asked for a king. So what does God say to him? They weren't mavaza you, they were mavaza me. Hashem Elokechem alkechem. Shema b'kolam, give them a king. but let them know that it comes with a tax, right? The Mishpat HaMelech, right? That didn't exist before, Reb Yaakov said. Why? Because a shofet doesn't have that Mishpat HaMelech. Shmuel was such a tzaddik, right? And Reb Yaakov mentioned this before in one of the pieces before. Shmuel was such a tzaddik that he decided, when he's writing shoftim, to write 2 stories at the end of the shoftim that would prove you need a king. Now, since God wanted a king, and I'm a shliach shel Hashem, I have to make it right. And even though I don't like it, I don't write what I like or don't like. I write what God wants me to write. And God wants Malchus, so he picked out 2 stories in the period of Shoftim, right, to show that if there would have been a king there, it could never have happened. Now, Rabbi Yaakov is going to go on to show specifically in each case why the Malchus would have been a Meridim of Malchus and what these people did, what Micha did and what Binyamin did. Okay? V'teida, Sharei Sefer Rus, Bavadei Nichtav L'chvod Shel David HaMelech. You can't deny that Sefer Rus was written for the honor of David HaMelech. What's the proof? The last psukim in Sefer Rus, it says, and, she gave birth to Oved, he gave birth to Yishai, right? So obviously the whole Sefer is there to give the yichus of David HaMelech, how David HaMelech got here. Im kein Shapa yesh loma shepesel micho pilegish begiva gam kein nichtavu lach shiva malchus. So it's easy to say if Shmuel wrote that lach shiva malchus. So here also we were saying that he wrote the end, which has nothing to do with Sefer Shoftim, so to speak. Sefer Shoftim is a history book, and all of a sudden there's 2 stories that we don't even know when they happened, right? The Radak doesn't even know when the stories happened. He says they could have happened at the beginning of Shoftim, the middle of Shoftim, the end of Shoftim. He doesn't exactly know, because according to Reb Yaakov, it doesn't matter. He brought 2 stories whenever they happened in the period of Shoftim to show you need a melech, right? Im kein Shapa yishlom shapesel micha glegish begiva gam kein nichtav lach shiva malchus. Ubeemes chazal bruach kotchem dorshu. Shav dafilu sefer Rus atzmo nichtav lochiach tzorach hamalchus. What is it? The Chazal in Baba Basra, when they talk about Sefer Rus, they say, what do they say? Vayihi b'mei shvot hashoftim, dor sheshofet, this is Kuf Tzadi Gimel, sheshofet is shoftav. This is a generation that judges its judges, all right? They had a right to judge its judges because, what does that mean? Klomar, shel moli haya melech b'Yisrael, lo haya eli melech ki godel hador machla v'chil yotzid l'chutz la'aretz. If there was a king, it says vayihi b'mei shvot hashoftim, and then Elimelech left the country. Trying to say, the Gemara says, Darsha Shofet and Shoftav. It is a generation that judged the judges, meaning you didn't do the job. You see, Elimelech left. When we find in Chazal, Masech the Brachas, where did Am Yisrael go to get Parnasa? When there was when the economy went bad, Baruch, right? The economy goes bad, the investments don't go well, right? Where did Klal Yisrael go? The Gemara Bracha says, David HaMelech got up to learn, what?
No, you go to war.
David HaMelech said, they came to David, and first David HaMelech said to them, well, each, part of the nation will support the other part of the nation according to one shot in the Rishonim, like, the poor people, the rich people poor, but they said there's not enough, right? Ain't a bar, what does it say? The sand doesn't fill the bar. There's not enough. So David HaMelech eventually says that you should go to war. Now, that's a very controversial thing because, stop making work for the economy, which, by the way, a lot of economies get really good at wars. The American economy during World War II was buzzing. Okay, people told me who lived through that. They died many years ago, but they told me that the America needed so much material that any business you were in, if you were in the Shmata business, they needed to make uniforms. There was a guy who was in the junk business. He used to take apart junk. America bought all his radiators, all his steel to make equipment. Right? He became a millionaire from that. at that time, right? Wars are not good for people, but they're pretty good for the economy, right? But some people learned the pshat of it is David said go to war because the Amalekites were like those guys in the south. What do you call those guys in the south that keep stealing all the animals from the Jewish farms? They go to the Israeli army, some of them.
What, Bedouins?
Bedouins, they're trackers, right? So some of the Mefarshim learn that David didn't mean just go out to war. But if the economy is bad, it's because of the Bedouins, because of the Amalekites that keep stealing our cattle. Let's go out to war and take back our cattle. That's how they get out of the politically incorrect thing, right? But what does Reb Yaakov say over here? When they needed Parnasa, they went to the king. The king should have said to them, you need Parnasa? Go to the finance minister. Don't come to me. The answer is they came to the king. To a shofet, if they would have come to the shofet, you know what he would have said to them? What does that have to do with me? I fight battles for God, right? I'm Ahmed, the Koach HaTorah, but I can't give you an economy. He says, so you see that if there was a king, they wouldn't have left. That's why he made Shvot HaShoftim, Darsha Shofet. Now, I want to tell you something interesting. Rashi already says the whole shtickle Torah of Reb Yaakov in 2 words, okay? Mamish, the whole shtickle Torah. Here. Vayibi meishvot hashoftim lifnei meloch melech Shaul shahayu adoros misparnesim alidei shoftim. What the heck does Rashi bring that here? It was the time of the shoftim. Okay, the time of the shoftim. That's when the story happened. Rashi says no. Lifnei meloch melech Shaul shahayu adoros misparnesim. Why does he put that in over here? The answer is because it could have only happened before Melech Shaul. Because once Melech Shaul comes, the Jews go to him and say, "We need Parnasa," right? So that's the first thing. Ulefikach k'shasayim Shmuel Hanavi Seder Shoftim, when he finishes the Sefer of Shoftim, Uma she'ir b'meim l'Am Yisrael lamdenu anhogis hashkocha im Am Yisrael hevivi beis maoros. He brings 2 maorot. Shehem l'chol rak beisipurim pratiyim. V'gomru l'takolos gedolos v'ilulei shayim melech l'bo advarim lidei kach. What did these 2 things happen? Plevegish Begiva caused almost a tribe to be wiped out, tribe of Binyamin. A terrible tragedy. What was Pesel Micha? Pesel Micha was an avodah zarah right in the middle of the country. Right, Pesel Micha, he's going to talk about it, opened up like a shtibel, right? And he had like his own Kohen, and he had his own avodah zarah there, and his trofim, right? But Reb Yaakov says, according to you'll see, he had even more than that. Watch this. Ve'viam lo lifi azman ha'meora rak kisiyum sefer shachrei shekvar molech melech b'Yisrael. He Shmuel, when he wrote Sefer Shoftim at the end of his life, he wrote it to say how much you need a melech, because 2 tremendous tragedies happened, and they wouldn't have happened if there would have been a melech. El shenimtzu b'vadei shezochru at kufa shahaisa malcha shamayim shoreres ulefikach hutzach lavi uvda de pesel micha. Rather, shenimtzu b'vadei shezochru at kufa shahaisa malcha shamayim shoreres. The malcha shamayim was shoreres at this point. There was no king. What does that mean? Listen to this Gemara. V'avar b'yam tzora. Amar Reb Yehuda ze solo shel Micha. When it said when they went, the Pesel Micha was already, when they went over the Yam Suf, it says that the Pesel Micha was already, the Jews had it already hidden. Okay? Tanya, Reb Nosson Omer. Nosson says, Migrav l'shilo gimel milim, v'ya asher ma'aracha, v'asher pesel micha mis'avrim zebazeh. From Grav, where Micha lived, to Shiloh was 3 miles. Listen to what the Gemara says. V'ya asher ma'aracha, and in the smoke of Shiloh would get mixed up with the smoke of Pesel Micha. What the heck is that? Rabbi Yaakov is wondering, like, what? The smoke used to get mixed up because they were close together. So when the smoke of the Korban Avodah Zarah and Korban and Shiloh went, they used to get mixed up, right? What is the Chazal trying to tell us over here? Harei shevinu razal shepestel shel Micha yikaviyochel tzara l'shilo. That the pesel Micha was not just a little stiebel in Borough Park. It was already a competition, a tzara for Shiloh. People started going. They said, "Why do we have to go to the great synagogue in Shiloh? We'll go to the stiebel with the Rebbe, right? You don't have to go. We'll go to the Rebbe and there's a small stiebel." Now watch Reb Yaakov's parsha here. In chapter Yud Zayin, it says like this: that there was a fellow from Har Ephraim, his name was Micha, right? And the whole story with his mother. And then it says he took the money, right? And he made V'ish Micha lo beis Elohim, vayas eforu trafim, vayimale es yad achad mi banav, vahi lo lekohen. Right? He took one of his children for a Kohen, and then it says, Vayamim ahein melech b'Yisrael, isha yashar beinav yaseh. What does that have to do with anything? Why? Right next to it says, it was a Beis Elokim, it says, a melech b'Yisrael. All of a sudden it just says that. Why does it say it there? Why didn't it say at the beginning of the parsha? A melech b'Yisrael, and he made. Why right here? This is the first time we see it says it. Right? Well, so Reb Yaakov says, Masha itzarazu lazu, v'hinei bi'arti makam achad ala melech hayil livnos beis Hashem, beis Hashem. Who was obligated to build the base of Mikdash? We see from the Tanach. David HaMelech says to Nasser, I'm obligated to build it. Shlomo HaMelech builds it. Before there was a king, did they build the base of Mikdash? Absolutely not. 400 years, there's no base of Mikdash. And nobody says boo, because no king. Right? The Makam Yuchad Lavoda, V'shakol Yisrael Bo B'moadim, Zero Makom HaMerkazi Shalom HaKulo, V'sham Hi, right? Where does David pick to build the base of Mikdash? After he picks out his place, right? He picks out where, there he says that we have to build the base of Mikdash. Ir David is right next door to the Makam of Mikdash. What does it say over there? That you'll go l'makam asher yivchar Hashem. When you have a problem, you go to the Makam Asher Yivchar Hashem, El HaShofet, or El HaKohen. You go to the place that Yivchar Hashem, right? That's the base of Mikdash, and that's where the Shofet was sitting. So you see from the text in the Torah that they go together. The Shofet, who's the Melech, and the Makam Asher Yivchar Hashem. Ayin Shavakiva, Shekeni, Lulia, Melech, B'Yisrael, also your base of Shemicha, Merida B'Malchus. If there was a king, certainly building a shtibel would have been a morid b'malchus, because you're trying to take over the Makam HaMikdash. You're trying to replace the Makam HaMikdash. The Mikdash is shaykh to the Melech, right? So you're going against the king, because the king is shaykh to the Beis HaMikdash. So that's a mirid b'malchus. That's the first thing, a melech b'Yisrael. And the second one, the Chaim Pilegish Begiva, right? L'chein Pilegish Begiva, Lefi Mashabir Ramban, Beseda Vayera, right? Shahaisam L'choma. This is page Kuf Tzadi Dalet already. Shahaisam L'choma B'nei Shifti Shal B'Yamim Muchalakim Zeh Bazeh. What was going on over here? There was a war because Shifti Shal B'Yamin were disagreement with what the Jews wanted to do. Meaning, im yesh lahem yirshus lebezdan lasos yogla Torah b'lo askamas bezdan shel shivtam. In other words, the Ramban over there, you remember that Ramban? The Ramban raises the question, what's the difference between Zdom and Pilegish Begiva? It's a very, very famous Ramban and a very interesting Ramban, how he's machalik between the two places, because it looks like the exact same thing, if you take a look at it, right? They're banging on the door, they want the guy, they want homosexual behavior, right? And he wants to give it, he actually gives his pilegesh, right? That's the whole story. It's very simple. So Ramban there says, why didn't Binyamin want to give over the town? The guys who did this is very strange. So he says, the Milchama came because the Shiftish of Binyamin were disagreeing in this. You didn't ask us, it says. Our Besdin has to decide that. The Besdin of the Shavit. Not your Bezdin has to decide what is it. Why is your Bezdin better than our Bezdin? Mashenki Moli Melech Vadehu Shein Tzorach Ez Askama Shehi Imhu Rotzel Asosyog. If there was a king, for sure, he doesn't need any haskama. He doesn't need any agreement, sort of agreement. Imhu Rotzel Asosyog. The Melech doesn't need. No one can say to the Melech, well, we're going to have a Bezdin in the town. The Melech says it. Kumosha Kosav Rambam, right? In Hilchos Melachim, Yesh Roshus LaMelech LaHorgo Ulataken Ol Kafim Mashar Shatzricha. The king has a right to kill and fix the world, fix up the world of Giva, right? According to our needs. So again, if there would have been a king here, he would have already taken care of it. Not just because he was a king, because the king has a right to do that. Same thing with Pesel Micha. Not because there would be a king, he would have stopped it. Because it actually is a Merida Babalchus. Right? That's what Reb Yaakov is saying over here. Okay, so Reb Yaakov not only just says, I like the pshat of Melech, being Kipshute Melech, right? And Shmuel wrote this in order to push the concept of Malchus after God told him to, right? But he shows actually these two stories actually better than any other story fit the concept of Morid Malchus. Okay, guys, we'll stop here, take it up next week. So next week I'm going to go over a piece that I told to Rav Soloveitchik, and not in the name of my grandfather, because I wanted to see what he would say. And he said, you're not allowed to say it.
Huh.
Okay? And I went back to Reb Yaakov to tell him it. Reb Yaakov smiled, and I'll tell you what he said next week. Okay? Any other questions? We're doing okay?
I think we're doing good. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be in touch. Take care.
Okay. See you.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Let's do it. Thank you. Bye.